so free. She challenged the whip, the gun, the knife. She challenged the fire, pulled from the bodies of slaves, made into laws, prisons, and courts.
Good afternoon and welcome back. Hope you all had a great weekend and are enjoying this holiday. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, aka Little Marco, is in Saudi Arabia today to discuss the future of both Gaza and Ukraine. The concern expressed by America's European vassals, its allies, is that the Trump administration is acting unilaterally without consulting who they believe to be relevant foreign partners about the wars in both countries. Richard Stengel, former Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs, said today on MSNBC, quote, "All wars end at the negotiating table. How do you get there without Ukraine at the table?" End quote. Well, I think the real and honest answer is very simple. Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am, of course, Wilmer Leon. Here's the point. We have a tendency to view current events as though they take place in a vacuum, failing to understand the broader historical context in which most events occur. During each episode, my guests and I have probing, provocative, and in-depth discussions that connect the dots between these events and the broader historic context in which they exist, thus enabling you to better understand and analyze these events that are impacting the global village in which we live. On today's episode, the question before us is, the Trump administration tells the world that the conflict in Ukraine is coming to an end, and it's not going to be good for Ukraine. Let's discuss this with my guest. I could say a lot of things about him, but all I really need to say, you all know who he is. Garland Nixon, my brother. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Look, I'll give you the marks of order. It's always an honor and a pleasure to connect the dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon.
Or you could have gone Gerald Horn. Thank you for inviting me. How you doing, man?
Fantastic. What's happening there, Dr.
Well,
Wilmer?
I'll tell you what, I'm doing better than the folks in Ukraine. So Lil Marco and Peach Hedgeseth are traversing the world, and they're spreading the news that returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders before Russia's military intervention is an unrealistic objective, their language. It is quite probable that the U.S. will call on Ukraine to formally recognize the territories it lost to Russia. There will be a demilitarized buffer zone along the frozen front line after a ceasefire has been reached. The administration does not see U.S. troops on Ukrainian soil. The U.S. does not, quote, believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome of a negotiated settlement, end quote. Garland, sounds like surrender to me.
Well, I think it's an acceptance of reality. It is an acceptance that, Ukraine, I mean, what is Russia, 26 and a half times bigger than Ukraine? It was folly to ever think that Ukraine had a chance at winning this conflict. I think there's a couple of things in there that Russia will have an issue with. And they've been consistently saying that they wouldn't accept a frozen or ceasefire or freezing it or anything like that. And what they've said is, well, look, we made deals with you in the past and all you did is rearm them. So we're concerned that if we get a ceasefire, it'll just give you time to rearm them like you did before. So I think they're going to have difficulty getting a deal. And I think they may get one, but I think if they don't, that I think the Trump administration is ready to just say, well, you know what, if we don't get a deal, that we'll just walk away and let Ukraine deal with it the best way they can. Yeah, what's interesting is watching Europe.
Hang on a second. Back up just a little bit.
Yeah.
Because when you say they will have difficulty getting a deal, who's the they? I'll put it like this. Let me put it a different way. I think the two sides, the negotiating sides, may have difficulty coming to an agreement if the Trump administration is pushing for a ceasefire because the Russians have been so adamantly opposed to it. I don't know, maybe if they give them a lot more, they will, but I think that, that the Russians will, but they've been so adamantly opposed to a ceasefire. And, as you and I have been discussing for the last 3-4 years, and that is that they had the Minsk Accord agreement, they had the Istanbul agreement, they had agreement after agreement that with the Russians, and the Russians' basically position is we've had agreement after agreement and you've never kept your word in the past. So we need a final solution to this thing once and for all, rather than what they see as another stopgap freeze that they don't have any confidence that, NATO will adhere to anyway. And I think that's the issue. And as you know, we talked about this. So in the end, the issue is NATO has broken deal after deal. How do they convince Russia that they're going to keep this one? And on the one hand, I can see Donald Trump talking to President Putin saying, that was all then, this is now. I'm not that guy. Even though under the first Trump administration, U.S. weapons were sent into Ukraine by Donald Trump. So, but with that, I can see Trump saying to Putin, that was them. It's not me. I'm a different guy. And that's somewhat true. But I can then see Putin saying, yeah, but you only got 3 years and 10 months left. And how do I know that the next person that succeeds you is not going to revert back to the same foolishness? I can't trust what you say, Garland.
Yeah, exactly. A big part of that is, and I've told you the old joke. My dad was a longshoreman, old school guy, and he had a 3rd grade education, right? And hard hat wearing guy, and he would do work for people on the side, and he always ended his negotiations on prices with this: looks like I'm gonna need the money up front, right? And I think that's what we're going to be looking, metaphorically at the Russians, basically saying any deal that we get, we want what we gonna get now. We don't want to have to count on you in the future. And so how do you pull that off with the ceasefire? I don't know. It's interesting because the Russians have said, we want to address the root cause. And as far as they're concerned, the root cause is NATO expansion. So that's going to be something to watch. Will the Trump administration be willing to close some bases on their border? Right now, the U.S. is still building bases in Finland as we talk. Are they going to say we're going to stop those bases? We're going to pull the missiles out of Poland? I think it's going to take some dramatic action. Now, if the Trump administration says we'll freeze those bases and we'll pull everybody out of them, we'll take the missiles out of it, we'll close the bases in Romania, it's going to take that kind of dramatic action, actual action, not promises, to get anywhere with the Russians, I think.
Well, as we listen to the description of the dialogue, you hear Marco Rubio now articulating Trump administration positions that Marco Rubio, as a senator, was directly opposed to. But he now has to carry the message of the administration. And one of the questions, in fact, you and I talked about this last week offline. I said to you, it's going to, when they first announced these positions, I said, it's going to be really interesting to see if Donald Trump is able to weather the rhetorical storm that the mainstream media is going to subject him to. And now when you listen to MSNBC, when you listen to CNN, they're giving you this so-called analysis, but the premises of their analysis is just ahistorical and flat out wrong. For example, they, of course, are articulating the position that Russia just invaded Ukraine for absolutely no reason. They don't talk about provocation. You and I, man, what? Damn near a year before the February 22nd beginning of the conflict, a lot of people don't seem to remember the April before that, Ukraine sent 100,000 troops to the Russian border. And Putin called Biden and said, you better back that thing up, homeboy, because my response will be asymmetrical and disproportionate. And Joe Biden got rattled and called Zelensky and said, get them troops out of there. Folks don't seem to remember any of that. Selective amnesia, Garland Nixon.
You know, one of the things that's interesting too here is the battle of the narratives, right? Because as you know, the narrative, the mainstream narrative, the NATO narrative was, if Putin, we've heard a variant, so right. Oh, he doesn't like democracy on his border. He wants to get the old Soviet Union back together. He just woke up one morning and just all of this crap, right? Recently, one of the Trump has said, well, you know, if I can't imagine that if, you know, NATO came up to his border and we started building on his border, Russia would never tolerate that. So he admitted that NATO expansion was it. Right. Mm-hmm. And he also said, look, you know, Russia's this big war machine. They defeated the Nazis and they defeated Hitler, he said, and they defeated Napoleon, and it's a big war machine. So basically, Trump came out and said, look, they were never going to win this. They were up against a superpower, and they're not a superpower, and they're not going to win it in the future. So he's admitted these things, but yet you still have the Europeans with this, you know, living in this false narrative about it. You've got the mainstream media still trying to push the, oh, well, Putin just woke up one morning and did it. And the people who are actually involved in the negotiations are saying, we're going to have to face the truth here. This was about NATO expansion, which gives them a chance to get somewhere. But from the other perspective, if you're the Russians and you're listening to this cacophony, right, then you still say to yourself, but I know there's still an element in the United States that wants to push that old crap. And I got to be concerned that they could, as you said, they could come to power again in 4 years. And then I got to deal with this crap again. So I better get this money in my hand, as it were. I better get these deals that I can see concretely today, because the future is going to have to take care of itself, you know?
And, you know, again, folks, you're going to hear me say this to Garland throughout this entire conversation. As you and I have discussed, we kept saying during the Biden administration, they want to get out, but how do they get out and structure a narrative so that they don't have to admit they lost? And Biden loses the election. So Trump seems to now have taken the position, this wasn't my war. This wasn't my mess. You started this. So in Trump's mind, he doesn't have to worry about the narrative, because he can blame the failure on, this started before I got here, never should have been started in the first place, even though I sent weapons to these folks while I was in office the first time. And so he, in his mind, he can structure the narrative where the egg isn't on his face.
Yeah, and the other issue, and this is important too, I think, and that is, you don't want to say the U.S. lost another war. You know, particularly the U.S. lost the war to Russia, that it was a proxy war, it was ours, and it was lost, and NATO lost everything. So you don't want to be the president that comes in and loses a war. So to me, Trump's only position, and let's be honest, it is an effective position, is to say, No, this wasn't the United States. We're far better than this. This wasn't me. This was a rogue administration that dragged us into a war that should never have happened. And I'm going to be the one to clean it up and get us out of it. The United States is great and wonderful. And as a wonderful country, we would have never done anything like that. Why this rogue administration? They betrayed the United States. And I'm going to come back and bring us back to our values. Now, here's the bottom line. Because he started the rhetoric prior to coming in, I'm going to get us out as soon as I get in. This would have never happened. He's created a dynamic. He's created a conversation where he can plausibly argue, this wasn't the United States, so we didn't lose a war. This wasn't me, so I didn't lose a war. It was a rogue group of politicians that screwed everything up, and I got to clean up their mess. And that's his only angle. But to be frank, I think it could be effective.
Oh, once the scribes subscribe to the narrative, then of course it'll carry the day, because folks will be bombarded with that garbage, and they won't have any other option, or any other, unless they watch our shows, they won't have any other option to the narrative. Now, Rumination with Andrew says, do they really want to win or lose, or is this to fight multiple wars to win over Eurasia? What I will say to you is, Biden got us out of Afghanistan, and remember, Trump is the one that signed the proclamation to end the war in Afghanistan. All Biden really did was follow through on Trump's order. Did a horrible job of doing it, but did it anyway. But what happened after Afghanistan? Ukraine. So basically, I can see Biden getting out of Afghanistan to go to Ukraine. Now, Trump is getting out of Ukraine, but the backstory there is getting out of Ukraine. Why? Because he wants to focus on China. So we're moving from one conflict to another conflict, moving from that conflict to another conflict. They can't seem to figure out peace.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens. The rhetoric of Trump was, what was it? He said, I'm going to be the peacemaker. Don't judge me by the wars that I win or lose or something. Judge me by the wars that I get out of. Do they want to confront China militarily? The rhetoric we're hearing is no, they're going to confront responsibly. And if you remember that Rubio speech where he said, well, there's great powers, I'm paraphrasing, he said, but in the past, when we had disagreements, we used diplomacy, and we need to get back to that. So are they moving into the next war? He also is saying that Trump also said something about, I want to meet with Russia and China so we can all cut our military budget in half. And I'm thinking, they don't need to cut their military. They ain't going broke on their military budget. We are. They're going to look at us like, what do you mean we cut ours in half? We ain't spending but a quarter of what you spending in the first place. You're trying to get us to help you pull your chestnuts out of the fire because you're up to your ears in debt over a war budget. Sorry, pal. They ain't going to do that. But so the question becomes,
wait a minute, and they have better technology.
Exactly.
So they have
lower prices.
Right. Go ahead.
They're doing a little better shopping job. I think they're making better quality equipment at a lower price. But again, the rhetoric we get, and let me add this. Two things that have happened too. So apparently they've started that sending ships through the Taiwan Strait crap again. The last couple of days they've done that. They're messing around on the State Department website that says we don't support independence for Taiwan. So they fooling around with that stuff. And I'm gonna tell you this: if you're Taiwan, you got to be looking at Ukraine saying, right, man, you know what I mean? If I'm in Taiwan and they're giving me the, join up and we're going to make you strong to stand up against China and all this stuff. If I'm Taiwan, I look at what happened in Ukraine and I say, I do not want to be part 2.0 of that program.
But to that point, because we know that there are a number of Taiwanese that see that reality and don't want no parts of that reality. But it's the ruling elite that the United States has put in power that are in vassalage, with the with the American power elite. So and this is playing itself out in Germany. It's playing itself out all over Europe. The bulk of the people understand what the future portends for them, and they don't want any parts of it. But their ruling elite are beholden, are vassals of the American process.
Yes, and you have to add this. There are some deluded people in the Trump administration who seem to be, and I'm sure you've heard this, well, now they're going to make friends with Russia and we can peel Russia away from China. Well, for starters, geographically speaking, they have one of the longest borders in the world. That's not going to happen. Right. Also, politically speaking, economically speaking, they're inextricably linked. China, they said when Russia was, in the conflict, China says, well, we'll buy all of everything you can produce almost. They actually, to some extent, they were the economic backstop for Russia, and it helped them too. Because they're like, look, we're buying oil from you. We're buying gas from you. That was a backstop to keep Russia's economy strong. And yet China, they needed those things. So they now have this, and I add this, I think both of them realized that during the Cold War, the U.S. exploited the Sino-Soviet split to, weaken the Soviet Union, et cetera. So that's not going to happen again. I think that the Trump administration is making a very, very serious philosophical mistake if they believe that they can split Russia and China after. Now, I think Russia and China realize, look, either we both, what's the old saying, either we hang together or we hang one at a time. There's no way to split them now. And they're wasting their time if they try.
Well, you're absolutely right. And I think there are a couple of more elements to validate the position that you're articulating. And the first one is, and you've heard me say this for years, they have different understandings of time. And their cultures are so many more thousands of years older than the American culture. So they have a, as Dr. King says, the moral arc of history is long and it bends towards justice. So they have a much longer historic view upon which to make their decisions. They don't make decisions for the immediate need or concern. They are always projecting into the future. And so it's there, to your point, understanding of they have a common enemy. And they've come out a couple of years ago saying our relationship now is beyond agreements. Our relationship now is beyond immediate need. We are friends. We are truly allies because we have a common enemy. So if Donald Trump thinks that somehow this is a real estate deal, another casino deal, where he's going to be able to leverage positions, he's already been leveraged and doesn't even realize it.
Yeah, I agree. There's the issue of geography. For the people who don't understand what's happening under the Biden administration, whether the Trump administration continues with it or not, I don't know. But under the Biden administration, this whole push for war in the Pacific was about a couple of things. Number one, it was about, okay, we may not be able to defeat China, but we can blockade them. So people can't get energy to them through, whether it's the Taiwan Straits or the various shipping lanes around the world, we can blockade them and they can't use the shipping lanes. And one of the things that Russia provides is this. They're running pipelines, the Power of Siberia, and they got another one called the Power of Siberia 2. So they're going to run. They built bridges between the two where they didn't have bridges. So what they've done is they've created a network of connections so that even if the U.S. would go to war and say, well, we're going to cut China off over land, they could get all of their energy, and they could also get the natural resources that they need, steel and all those kinds of things, without having to worry about the U.S. being able to blockade them on the high seas. And additionally, now that there is some level of a melting in the Arctic, they have a new route. They call it the Arctic Sea route that Russia is able to control for China's moving its goods. So the bottom line is they're also working together so that in the same way that China provided an economic backstop for Russia during the Ukraine conflict and 24,000 sanctions or whatever it was, in the event that the U.S. tries some funny business with China, Russia has provided a backstop for them so that they can still move their goods and so that they can still access their energy. So as you said, like Malcolm X said, they have a common enemy, a common oppressor, and they know they've got to they in order to survive, they have to, it's not that it's going to weaken it. They're going to continually strengthen it. They're building the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline. They will be building more pipelines, building more roads. I will bet you this, at some point, they're going to have high-speed rails.
I was just going to say the same
back
thing.
And forth to move
say
goods, not people, to move natural resources on high-speed rails so they don't have to put that stuff to the ship.
I was just going to say the very same thing. Rumination with Andrew says, it depends on what the U.S. puts on the table. Humans seem to be easily manipulated. No one is truly an ally of anyone. A couple of things there. One, it depends on what the U.S. puts on the table. I don't think so, because the United States is no longer the unipolar hegemon as it used to be. The United States is now, I don't want to say a toothless tiger, but it's a old tiger, and now so the threats, the economic threats that the United States was making, we're going to turn the ruble into rubble. Not the rise of BRICS. Now, as we were going to get into talking about this, but now Visa and MasterCard are looking forward to moving back into Russia. This game is over. The clock hasn't wound down, but we're 2 minutes left in the game, and you can pick the sport. Russia and China are up by 50, and so you pick the sport with 2 minutes left, up by 50. Game over. He also says humans seem to be easily manipulated. Yeah, but again, I think you have to understand the difference in mindset. These people, when you talk about Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, when you talk about Sergei Lavrov and Wang Yi, these folks have different mindsets. And compared to Marco Rubio, Lil Marco is bringing a pea shooter to a gunfight when he talks to Sergei Lavrov. Marco Rubio don't know nothing. So, and what was the other point? Where'd it go? Where's the other point he made? No one is truly an ally. Put it this way: you aren't going to separate Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin with a bologna sandwich. Garland.
One of the things that it's important what he said when you're talking about okay, what do we bring to the table? What leverage do we have? We'll relieve sanctions. With the sanctions, there are those in Russia who are making the argument that they don't want the sanctions lifted because their economy has grown faster than ever without the sanctions. The sanctions have forced them to do some other things that now have caused their economy to grow. That they have become more autarchical, shall we say, where they can take care of themselves. Think about this. Before, they had McDonald's, and McDonald's made money in Russia. That money left Russia. When McDonald's left, what did they do? Russia replaced it with their own version of McDonald's. It has the same golden arches and all, but it has a little bit different name, owned by a Russian company. All of these companies that were doing business in Russia, it's a Western company, they do business in Russia, and then they take their money back to Great Britain, US, or whatever. Those companies close down. Oh, we're not doing business with Russia. What does Russia say? A Russian company would open up and replace that stuff, but the money stays in Russia now. Might I add also, as a result of the sanctions, before, these billionaires, oligarchs, whatever you call them, would make a fortune, and then they go put it in London, the city of London, New York. They're buying skyscrapers. They're doing all that around the world. Not now. When these billionaires make all this money around the world, they keep it in Russia because they're afraid it'll be confiscated elsewhere. So these sanctions have been very beneficial for Russia. Has now become the fourth largest economy in the world. It's projected to grow 4.1%, one of the fastest growth spurts on Earth right now. So what do we have to, well, we'll relieve the sanctions. Russia's going to say it don't matter to us if you relieve the sanctions or not. We're doing pretty well. The sanctions have done well for us. Now you got to offer us something that we want. We've given you a list of things. So, and here's the other part. If it don't work out, Russia can say, well, we're winning the war. So you know what we're going to do? It didn't work out. We'll go finish winning the war. Y'all have a nice day. We have no leverage. We got leverage over Ukraine. We got leverage over Europe, but we have zero leverage over Russia. We got to kind of give them what they want, or they don't have to fight. We just walk away.
And your point about the strength in the growth of the Russian economy growing at 4.1%, take that out of the numeric context. And what does that mean for the Russian people? It means that their economy, it means that their society, it means they're doing pretty well. It is in this instance trickling down to the life of the average Russian. So I draw a blank on who was that former Fox reporter that went and did the interview with Putin?
Tucker Carlson.
Tucker Carlson goes into a Russian grocery store and says what? Oh my God, I thought we were going to walk in here and see empty shelves and beggars in the street. And what do I see? Everything I wanted to buy is here and cheaper than I expected it to be. So Putin is not getting pressure from his citizenry to take another tack. Juxtapose that to, I was at Giant Supermarket on Saturday. Eggs were $10.48 a dozen. And you know, I always talk about the price of tomatoes, the price of large tomatoes at 3.50 cents. So the United States, China over the last 15 years has pulled 800 million people out of abject poverty. The United States can't deal with 800,000. So these are the realities on the ground that are impacting the Chinese citizens' worldview, impacting the Russian citizens' worldview. And when you look at the polls, how do Chinese people feel about their government? 90% of them love them. Vladimir Putin won with 86% of the vote. And folks don't, oh, well, that was a Russian election. No, folks, you need to really understand what's going on over there. Your thoughts.
Well, the U.S. polls, the polls that the United States sponsored before the last Russian election, our own polls said Vladimir Putin should get 86% of the vote. He got 87%, so he performed 1% better. But, that being said, so it's clear, everybody knows Vladimir Putin is very popular there, the Chinese government. Why? Well, it's quite simple. Because they delivered materially for the average person. As they say, was your life better off than before 4 years ago, right? So the people in Russia look and they say, hey, our economy's getting stronger. We got jobs. We're getting paid. Things are going pretty well. Whoever's in office, Vladimir Putin, we like him. He's doing a good job. Xi Jinping, you're pulling people out of poverty. Our economy's growing. Things looking good. They're going to support him. Donald Trump's trying to get what they got. Not just Donald Trump. The U.S. government is trying to get what they got. They're trying to get the support from them, their people, because they got to deliver for the people of the United States. And we're a neoliberal country. I don't see how they can, in a financialized economy, deliver for anybody but the billionaires, because that's what our economy is set up to do, you know. But I think right now, the bottom line is, if they want to, they don't have a lot to offer the Russians. Would the Russians want to come back into the SWIFT system or stuff like that? Yeah, but if they don't, it don't matter. They're having success now. So they've told you what they want. You have come to our border. You're building bases on our border. You're putting missiles on our border. We are threatened by that. We want security. I don't think the Russians are worried about the Europeans, because they know ultimately whatever deal is made, if the Trump administration says to the Europeans, you got to go along with it. If the Europeans say no, the Trump administration can say, oh, by the way, you buy a lot of liquid natural gas from us. That's going to stop if you don't sign this right here. And the Europeans got us. They know we got them over a barrel. But we don't have any, to me, as I look at, do you see any leverage we have over the Russians in this? I see nothing.
No, zero leverage. And again, I want to go back to this point, ruminations. It depends on what they put on the table. No, it doesn't, because to your point, we have no leverage. And one of the things that jumped out at me when they first started talking about the readout from the call between Putin and Trump was Putin saying, I will call Zelensky and bring him up to speed. I'm going to say that again. Zelensky is, and here's to ruminations, and I'm not attacking you. You just made this point, and it stimulates thought. Too many people actually believe that Zelensky has a say-so in this. He didn't have a say-so when it started, because remember, he had reached an agreement with Putin in April of 2022.
Yeah. 2022, a month after the thing started. They had a month or two after it started,
and they sent Boris Johnson over there to tell him, no, sir, under no circumstances is the West going to allow you to engage in a peace deal. Zelensky has no say-so in this. His behind got whooped 3 years ago. So for him now to come on whatever show he was on and say, you know, I am not going, dude, nobody's listening to you. Nobody's listening. What you say doesn't matter. So it doesn't matter to for the most part what the United States puts on the table. They are negotiating not peace. They're negotiating surrender. This is not a peace deal. This is fire up the USS Missouri, resurrect Hirohito, sail that rascal into the Black Sea, and let's get this surrender deal signed, because it's over. It's all a matter of what color the car is going to be. You're arguing over color.
Well, you know, if you recall also something we discussed long ago, Sergei Lavrov, they said something about a deal, and then the British or someone said, well, this has to be solved on the battlefield. And Sergei Lavrov said something to the effect of, well, perhaps you should consult history and look at Russia's history on the battlefield, right? And bottom line is this, and this is all we're saying, it has been solved on the battlefield.
Right, it's over.
Issue is only how you end it, because it's been, we won, they won. Who want to be the last Ukrainian to die? That's up to y'all. When is the last Ukrainian die on the battlefield? That's up to y'all. Now, if we resolve it this way, we can talk about where we stop and how far we go. Do we go to the river? Do we take this city? If we have a deal, we'll talk about where we stop. If we don't have a deal, we'll just stop when we get ready to stop. And that could be the Polish border, maybe not. But so, you know,
I'm going to whoop your behind until I'm tired of whooping it.
Exactly.
I'll stop when I'm tired.
Exactly. You know what? You just made a good point. The only thing they're negotiating now is when the Russians stop. Because the Russians decide when, and you have no leverage to make them stop. You have no ability to make them stop. And the Trump administration have already said, we have no motivation to go in there and fight and bomb or spend any more money to make them stop. So you already said, the Russians already know you don't want to throw no more money. You don't want to throw bad. They made it clear, we don't want to throw no money. And this is being wasted and stolen and pilfered. And we don't want to send no weapons. That's just going to get blown up. So can we get some kind of a deal? And you're right. In a way, it's like the deal is the Russians make a list of things. You know something? We don't have to stop. Here's a list of things. If you'll check off yes on all of those lists and the way we said it, and we do all the things we need to do, then we'll stop. Otherwise, what are we going to talk about? But you know what? Another interesting thing, though. One other thing I want to throw into this. Mm-hmm. If you read the readout from Marco Rubio's conversation with Lavrov, and if you read into the conversation between Vladimir Putin and Trump, what you realize is, and I'm sure it's the business interest in the United States. You know, for instance, was it Exxon or Gulf that had a deal before all this happened to do joint exploration in the Arctic for oil? There were companies that stood to make a lot of money working with the Russians. And I think the other side of it is there are a bunch of these corporations that are saying we're losing out here. Look at their economy growing. And look at all this money to be made.
It's all about markets.
Yep. So I think that the discussion with Rubio, and when they sit down and talk, they're going to talk to the Russians. Ukraine is a sidebar. They're going to be like, okay, y'all won, whatever. What do you need for Ukraine? Let's finish that. But, we got a couple things we want to talk about, oil and gas, and lower the price of this and that. And I think there's some other, this is about economics. And they just will try to utilize the Ukraine discussion to expand on the economic partnerships with Russia, because they look, Russia is more of an economic powerhouse than it was before. And these greedy jokers, they want to get some of that money any way they can. They don't care about Ukraine. Ukraine could drop off the face of the earth tomorrow. They got no investment in it.
Gil Scott Heron told us, ask them what they're fighting for, and they'll never tell you the economics of war. Kevin Baptiste with a $20 super sticker. Thank you. He says, to both your points, Rand Paul has asked for an audit of the gold reserve of Fort Knox. Both your thoughts on this, please. I didn't know there was any gold in Fort Knox anymore. I thought it was.
There may not be. Look, they may open it and say, wait, are they all the gold's down there? Hey, it's empty.
And if there is, it belongs to Venezuela.
Yeah. And Haiti.
And Haiti and Russia, since we've stolen all the gold from them. And not to make light of your question, Kevin, I thought that I didn't think, and I don't know this because I haven't looked at this in years, but I thought reading years ago that particularly once we moved off of the gold standard, that Fort Knox is empty.
Yeah, and I don't know how relevant it is anyway to a financialized economy where you print money with the Federal Reserve anymore,
right.
The way they're doing things. But I will say this, in watching, what's his name? Old Doge guy wandering around the Treasury, and they're doing this. I do think that, and I refer to, I'm going to say this, when I looked in the front row of the Trump inauguration, and I saw like $1.5 trillion, and it wasn't but 5 guys standing there. I said, that's the real what's the term I use? Board of directors for the United States. That's the board of directors. There are a lot of things going on that people are like, Trump's doing this, and I'm like, Trump ain't got no say in what the board of directors say. When the board of directors say we're going to do this, because people are like, oh my gosh, Musk is in the Treasury. I said, he's the richest man in the world. You don't understand. That's his interest.
Where else do you expect him to go?
You don't get to go in the Treasury. You don't get to walk in there. Him or Warren Buffett or the Amazon guy, any of those guys, they can wander in the Treasury. the Federal Reserve, Fort Knox, anytime they want. They are the board of directors of this country. And even whether it's people in the Senate, people are like, I don't think RFK Jr. or this person will get through. I say, when the board of directors calls the senators and they say, I want this person, this person, and this person to get through, ain't nobody there going to tell them no. They're getting through. So the board of directors, a lot of these over the top things that are happening financially, economically regarding government right now, that people are like, Trump's doing that. If Trump, in my opinion, just my opinion, if Trump tried to do that without the blessing of the board of directors, he wouldn't live a minute. The board of directors, for whatever reason, have decided that they're changing monetary policy, or they're going to make government changes. Whatever these powerful board of directors have decided they're going to do, Trump isn't all that relative to it. If Trump dropped dead tomorrow, trust and believe that what's his name, Vance would do the same thing. And if both of them dropped dead, whoever's the president or the leader of the Senate would do the same thing, because these really powerful decisions and economic changes are the board of directors of the company. Usually you don't see them. Usually they're in the background, and you'll see the president or the Senate. You'll see an avatar for power. And then you can get mad at the president or the Senate or whoever. They ain't the real power. The real power has come forward now, and they're deciding what they're going to do. And it was funny. I'm watching Trump, and Elon Musk is saying, we're going to do this, and this is how you do it. They're in the Oval Office, and Trump is sitting there playing tiddlywinks, crossword puzzles and stuff, right? Why? Because it ain't his decision. The people in power are making decisions right now for whatever reason. That's a whole different discussion, but they're the ones who decide how this thing happens, and ain't nobody going to say no. And you know what? Let me add one other thing. People are like, we'll go to a judge. Ain't no judge going to say no to the board of directors. When the board of directors says, Judge, we're going to do some things in the Treasury and Fort Knox and the Federal Reserve, you know what that judge is going to say? Yes, sir. Because that's the real power. The judges in the courts, that's for us. That's to make us believe that there's some kind of system of power and justice and this and that. The board of directors, that's their game. That's their chessmen that they move around. That's for us. They don't abide by those rules.
So a couple of things. One, Cherie asked, what is a fiat currency? A fiat currency is a currency issued by a government that has no tangible asset behind it. So when we were on a gold standard, the thought was, for every dollar in circulation, there's a dollar of gold that is in Fort Knox to back it up. When we were on the silver standard, the idea was, for every dollar, in fact, if you remember, because I have some in a safe deposit box, they were called silver certificates.
Yep.
Every dollar said at the bottom of it, redeemable in silver. In fact, there are those who will say to you that the movie The Wizard of Oz is actually an allegory that was produced in I guess it was the 30s, during the debate about whether or not we were going to be on the gold standard or the silver standard. So when the adage of follow the yellow brick road was the gold standard. And Oz, OZ, is how you weigh gold and silver. So there are those who can make the argument that each of the characters represented a different element, primarily of the working class in the United States, and what were their interests. And so there are those who can make I think a fairly credible argument that The Wizard of Oz was an allegory for the debate that was going on in the 30s about whether or not the United States was going to be on a gold standard or a silver standard, or just issue fiat currency. So Cherie, that's a very long answer to a very short question. So let me see where I want to go here. Oh, so you mentioned, let's switch focus a little bit. You mentioned Doge and Elon Musk. And what I think is one of the things I think is very important for people to understand, particularly as it relates to the latest complaint about him being in the IRS, and the files that he is trying to gain access to. Elon Musk is trying to gain access to files that he should have absolutely no access to. And the reason is he is not engaging directly with taxpayers. The director of the IRS does not have access to the files that Elon Musk is trying to get access to. The political appointees that are in the IRS that were under the Biden administration, they do not have access to the files that Elon Musk is trying to gain access to. And the reason is they don't engage directly with taxpayers. It's only the employer. When you have a tax issue and you call the IRS to get your problem resolved, the person on the other end of the phone can punch in your name, pull up your file so that they can engage with you intelligently on your issue. This has nothing to do with waste, fraud, and abuse.
Agreed.
Garland.
Let me say this. And as I said before about the ruling elite and the board of directors, and he will get access to those files. You and I know this. That richest man in the world, I think that he's a point man for, you saw the group. You look and there's Bezos, there's Tim Cook, there's Zuckerberg, there's the richest man in India, Ashwani, there's Thiel. The tech money in the world was right there. Here's what I think, and I don't know, people can call it conspiracy theory or whatever. They're going to get access. They're getting access to everything economically, every single thing. This is not an accident. I think that I don't know how, there's going to be significant changes in our monetary system. They're going to change our monetary system. And in order to change the monetary system, they have to access everybody's money, everything, everywhere, to change the entire monetary system. I think they changed the monetary system. And I'm going to add this. One of the things we've been hearing lately is this. Oh, lots of people will be fired in all kinds of corporations. And what are they going to replace them with? It's already started, AI. They're getting rid of all of these federal employees, right? In order to put an AI program in the government, if you get rid of 70%, 60%, 50%, whatever of all the federal employees, the government will not work at all unless you replace them all with AI. And in order for the AI to work, it has to have access to everything. So I think that I call them the libertarian tech bros, the Peter Thiels and the Musks and all of these guys together, that they get access to all of that. And then it goes straight to AI, and the whole government's run off AI. In the same way that these corporations are firing all of these people and changing lawyers, doctors now are getting fired and replaced with AI. The government will be run off. If you watch the Terminator, Skynet, as scary as that is, but all jokes aside, they're going to set that thing up with AI, in my opinion, because they know you can't get rid of all the federal employees. Who's going to answer the phones? Who's going to work on this or that? But they got to get in every detail in every file in order to set up the full AI. And I think you're going to see AI happen. And I think they're understanding that they're all going to get Luigi'd if people keep hurting. So there's going to be some kind of giveaway, some kind of basic income, whatever, come in to try to, get rid of taxes, something to try to pacify people from the economic pain that they're feeling. But I think AI is coming. What do you think about it? I mean, it's just a theory. What do you think, Wilmer?
No, I think you're absolutely right. If there were any real debate between you and I on this, it would be a matter of degree, not a matter of is it going to happen or not. And I'm going to drop an F-bomb here for everybody who I want to forewarn everyone. I'm about to drop an F-bomb, and the F-bomb is fascism. That's exactly what Donald Trump is bringing into this so-called representative democracy, is fascism. Elon Musk bought his way into the Oval Office, standing next to the Resolute desk for $250 270 to 280. What's 10 million amongst friends? $280 million. That's how much it cost him to bring his little self and X into the Oval Office, was $280 million. The financial elite, or in this instance, the techno elite, are using the government for their own interests. And they have an army, and they have a domestic police force and a National Guard to ensure that their interests are protected. And that's one of the reasons why Donald Trump pardoned them 1,500 people that attacked the Capitol, was because he now sees them as his personal army. Garland.
Now, let me say this. I'm glad you said that. It reminded me of something of an F-bomb. Just something came back that a couple years ago. Yanis Varoufakis used a term, an F-bomb.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, what we have now is no longer capitalism. Here's the term he used: techno-feudalism.
Yes.
And basically what he said is what we're calling the tech bros, the Peter Thiels and the Zuckerbergs, all of these tech guys who are billionaires, trillionaires, whatever you want to call it. No, the world has never seen money like these people have, right?
Mm-hmm.
That they have a feudal order of their own. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that basically, for instance, whereas before the feudal lord would have all of this property and you could live on his property, or if you be sold on his property, and they grow stuff and they say, okay, so he had all of these property, right? And he said, but if you look at Amazon, isn't it the same kind of thing? You can sell and buy on Amazon. It's like a big farm. Like he rents out and right. He controls that, right? And so that X, any of them, it's like a big online virtual property. It's techno-feudalism. So these people are kind of like the lords, the kings and queens and lords and noblemen. And so now they're putting themselves in a position to run the whole king's court, right? And so now add this. When you put in some kind of AI programs that's running the government, well, look right now, if you look at our government, think about this. Amazon, Microsoft, all of them, right? They're the ones that have the web hosting and all of that for the CIA and the IRS. So these guys are already hosting a lot of the information that the government has through their government contracts, right? So now they're keeping the information. They get on the other side of it. They're generating, they're keeping it. And now, which is very dangerous, but that's the direction it is, whether we like it or not, they're doing it. Now you have Bezos and Ashwani and whoever, Apple, you name it, Cook, who now have full control of the data and the day-to-day running of government, and they run it in a direction that they want to. But then they can decide how they want to do. Look, if they're in charge of all of the finances, right? If you're not doing what they like, they can cut your bank money off. That you're not allowed to do this. You know what I mean? They can.
I know exactly what you mean.
They can now say, well, you're not going along with this or that, so you're not going to be able to do any banking for 46 hours until such time as you come along and stop, commenting on a certain country that shall go unnamed that we don't want you to comment on. You know what I'm saying? It's full total control by the feudal class. Return of feudalism, but a techno-feudalism. I would advise everybody out there, look up Yanis Varoufakis and techno-feudalism and watch some of the stuff. This was 3 or 4 years ago he was predicting this.
Yes, absolutely right. And what, to your point, when you look at TikTok, what is the major complaint that the United States government has about TikTok? Control of data and access to American user data. Even though TikTok information is stored on Oracle servers in Texas, so there's a firewall. But the narrative is, oh, we got to get rid of TikTok because their access to China's access to user data. You have Elon Musk rummaging around the IRS, and what is he doing? Accessing data. You have Elon Musk rummaging around the Treasury Department doing what? Accessing data. It's the same thing, but the mainstream isn't connecting those dots, which is what we're here to do. And now I just heard, because Huawei came out about 6 months ago or so with the Mate 60 phone that also has the satellite capability. You're now seeing commercials for T-Mobile. T-Mobile phones are in beta testing to connect with Musk's Starlink system. Folks, go ahead, Garland.
I was just going to say, look, Amazon, Bezos, they already host data for the CIA, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't really need the CIA, do they? If they got all of your data already, all they got to do is cross-reference it with the CIA data. They got your phone, they got your taxes, they got everything. Any move you make, they cross-reference it with your CIA data. They cross-reference it with your banking data because your banking goes through your phone or you're doing online banking, right? They cross-reference it with NSA data, where you are, location data on Google, right? So now they have your government data. You've got one of the tech bros over here. He's storing data for the NSA, CIA, and maybe Apple. They're storing data for this. And all they have to do is constantly cross-reference your data. And so they have full and complete and total control.
You got a couple more minutes?
I got to get ready to run in the fast, as a matter of fact.
Okay. Well, look, then with that, you are more than gracious. You gave us the time. I got to bring you back because there is obviously a whole lot more for us to discuss. My dear brother Garland Nixon, man, thank you. Greatly appreciate it. Look forward to having you back.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
man. So, folks, the other thing I wanted to get to quickly with Garland had to do with the mayor of New York, Eric Adams, and he is balking. There are now, I think the number I saw was 30 prominent Democrats in New York are demanding that Eric Adams resign. And he said, I think in a speech on Sunday at some church in New York, he said that he's on a mission from God and he's going nowhere. And the New York Post reported, and you know, the New York Post is really, really funny. It's unclear if the grace of the Almighty will be enough to keep Eric Adams, a Democrat seeking his second term, in Gracie Mansion with the cascade of scandals and indictments rocking his administration. He pled not guilty to the charges that he fast-tracked the opening of the Turkish consulate in Manhattan in exchange for $123,000 worth of bribes, and that he sought illegal donations from Turks who poured tens of thousands in cash into his 2021 campaign. Then the Trump administration came along, which Eric Adams had been cozying up to, particularly on immigration. And the whole hook there is, in order for Trump to really persuade or validate his attack on immigrants, he really needed a big city mayor, such as an Eric Adams, to allow ICE access to the city. And Eric Adams, once he was charged with these felonies, basically fell prey to being compromised, being leveraged by the Trump administration. So and here's how you know that that's true, is because if Donald Trump were really concerned about Eric Adams, if Donald Trump was really just looking out for justice and wanting to do the right thing by Eric Adams, and I put that in quotes, the right thing, he would have pardoned him, unconditionally pardoned him. He would have said, whatever, he would have said, under the Biden administration, you were falsely accused and charged with these felonies. And because I am the purveyor of justice, I'm going to pardon you. But he didn't do that. Donald Trump got the Department of Justice to withdraw the charges. And notice, the charges were not with the attempt is not to withdraw the charges with prejudice, meaning that they could never be brought forth again under the text of double jeopardy. He just said, we're going to withdraw the charges, which means if Eric Adams, 2 days, 2 months, 3 years down the road, decided for whatever reason to go against the perceived interests of Donald Trump, the charges could be reinstated. Another witness could surface out of nowhere and, based upon this new testimony or these new statements by this new witness, guess what, mayor or former mayor? Guess what? We're going to reinstate these charges. We're going to come after you behind again. So basically, Eric Adams is getting pimped. He's getting pimped flat out. Might as well call Iceberg Slim. In fact, you might want to call Donald Trump Iceberg Slim because he's just flat out pimping Eric Adams. And now Eric Adams wants to sound like what's his name from the what was that movie? Shoot, I forgot that. Anyway, I'm on a mission from God. Really, it's amazing to me the hypocrisy that that presents itself in the form of religious protection. I'm moving forward because God is watching out for me. No, I think you just got played by Donald Trump, and you might be confusing the messages that you're hearing. As Richard Pryor said, it may not be the voice of God, which is why I did not venture down that alleyway. Anyway, with all that, Blues Brothers, thank you, Robert. Blues Brothers, as Elwood, we're on a mission from God. Thank you, Robert, for keeping me, and Kevin, the Blues Brothers, greatly appreciate it. Tom, Trump wants to be the king of Gaza without Gazans. Wow, the American dream lives on. I like that. I might have to use that, and I will. Let me make a note. I'll quote you, Tom Mateague, on that point if I use it. That he wants to be the king of Gaza, the American dream, and pay very close attention to how all of that gets negotiated, because the Saudis have been very clear that Trump trying to make Gaza into the Riviera on the Mediterranean, they're not buying it, and really nobody else is buying it other than you and Benjamin Netanyahu. And also, I think you have to factor into this Ansar Allah, because they've kind of stepped back, but they are just, I think, sitting back and watching how this is playing out. And if they start to see that the tide on this is turning in a direction that they don't want it to turn, I think will start to see more missiles going into Tel Aviv, and much to the dismay of the Israelis. And I don't know that there's any negotiating with Ansar Allah. Remember, they kicked the Saudi Arabia's behind. They brought Saudi Arabia to the negotiating table, and they brought the Saudis just about a year and a half ago were ready to sign, or maybe two, were ready to sign, a peace deal with Ansar Allah, until the United States stepped in and said, similar to what they said to Zelensky, no, you're not going to sign a peace deal with these people. So these folks don't joke. These folks don't play. These folks don't mess around. So let me read this. Please make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new episode of the show. Join me Monday through Fridays at 3 p.m. as we break down the issues that matter. I'm working to reach 10,000 followers, and every donation helps. Please, folks, help to keep us on the air. Your support makes all the difference. Subscribe today. Be a part of this journey, because as we see what's unfolding right now relative to the Ukraine, remember I talked about the Oppenheimer moments, and I talked about there are periods, there are epochs, there are circumstances and times that dramatically change history. And usually you don't realize that you were in the moment. This is, and I reference Oppenheimer because he was the one as he was watching the explosion of the gadget, the first nuclear test, and he said, I am the destroyer of worlds. He knew at the moment, he was in the moment. And I'm telling you all, as Donald Trump is trying to bring an end to the conflict in Ukraine, and you can question his motives, because his motives always have to be questioned. And for as deplorable and as despicable of a human being as he is, a broken clock is right twice a day. And on this one, he's right. We can question his motives, and we're going to have to pay very, very close attention. Remember, Zelensky just said he has instructed his subordinates not to sign a minerals deal with the United States. The United States presented Ukraine with a document to access its minerals, but offered nothing in return. Zelensky says he's directed his ministers not to sign off on a proposed agreement to give the U.S. access to Ukraine's rare earth minerals because the document was too focused on U.S. interests. The proposal focused on how the U.S. could use and access Kyiv's rare earth minerals as compensation for support already given to Ukraine by the Biden administration. So now they're trying to structure this narrative. The West is trying to structure the narrative that Ukraine owes the United States for the support that the United States has provided, where in reality, Ukraine was the proxy of the United States. The Ukraine was the stalking horse for the United States. The Ukraine was the whipping post for the United States against Russia. It was the bait. It was the chum thrown overboard in the boat in the ocean to draw the sharks, and I use that term very liberally, to draw the sharks to the boat. But what happened is the United States threw the chum in the water. The United States threw the Ukraine overboard. And when the sharks came, what did they say in the movie Jaws? you better get a bigger boat. Because Russia, oh, thank you, Hassan. Excellent analysis, doctor. Thank you. Go click that button, Hassan, please, so that we can stay on the air. So again, we're in the moment. All of that to say this: we are right now in the moment, and MSNBC isn't telling you that. FAA crashes while Delta plane crashes while landing in Toronto. This is, I have a monitor on in here, and apparently it's showing a plane in Toronto upside down. Another plane crash. So all of that to say, you're in the moment right now, and you're going to have to pay very close attention, because I think the peace deal is, for all intents and purposes, already done. When you start having Visa and MasterCard talking about regaining access to the Soviet, to Russia, I think it's all over but the shouting. And Zelensky, this is performance art for him. Because understand something, he's technically no longer the president of Ukraine. His term expired last year. And according to Ukrainian law, and this is something that, again, Joy Reid and Rachel Maddow and all of these, Ali Velshi and all of these people, they aren't going to tell you this. But even in a time of war, even in a state of martial law in Ukraine, even in a state of martial law, the power of the president after the term reverts to the Rada, which is the Ukrainian parliament. The president no longer has power. And that's one of the things that President Putin is saying to the world. I can't negotiate with him because dude has no power upon which to negotiate. He has no authority to sign an agreement because his term expired. They did not hold new elections. And in a time of war or martial law, the power does not remain with the president. The power reverts to Congress. Barbara, thank you for that $10 super sticker. Greatly, greatly appreciated. So, folks, it's very important to pay attention to this, the details of which are not that complex. They're not nearly as complex as people would make it out to be. And again, I'll read this one more time. Please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new episode of Connecting the Dots podcast. Dr. Gerald Horn is going to be with us tomorrow. You don't want to miss that. Join me Monday through Friday at 3 Eastern as we break down the issues that matter. I'm working to reach 10,000 followers, and every donation helps us do that. It's keeping us on the air. And our time and our circumstance is quite tenuous, I will admit to you. And that's just not a marketing pitch. I'm telling you, honestly, I'm running out of money. Your support makes all the difference in the world, because remember, we do this for you, but we can't do this without you. So Holistic Politics, you say, thank you, Dr. Leon. Holistic, you are more than welcome. And I think Holistic Politics, if you're in Finland, you're charged with getting everybody in Finland to subscribe to the show. I appreciate your work towards this effort. Cherie, thank you for $10. Holistic, I appreciate your efforts, but you've got to get everybody in Finland to subscribe to this show. That's the charge I have posed upon you. Kevin Baptiste, damn, Dr. Horn, gotta work. Absolutely. Got to work, because Gerald will be with us. He's always so gracious. holistic, I'll try, sir. I know you're trying. And I wasn't saying that in any way, shape, or form to say that you weren't. I was just calling out the fact to the audience that we have someone in Finland whose job it is to get everybody in Finland to watch the show. So if you're watching in Denmark, we need you to do that. If you're watching in Sweden, we need you to do that. If you're watching in Cleveland, you got to get everybody in Cleveland watching this show, because obviously we are bringing it every single day, because that's what we do here on Connecting the Dots. So with that being said, again, I got to thank my dear brother Garland Nixon. I hope you all enjoyed me getting the band back together. And AM, thanks for the show and for the Inside the Issues. Well, that's the other place you can go, is Inside the Issues on Sirius XM 126 Saturdays from 11 to 2 Eastern on channel 126. And you can also check out my latest op-ed. When they tell you about themselves, believe them. I've gotten pretty good critique on that piece. So with all that being said, again, I got to thank Garland Nixon for joining me today. Thank you all so much for listening again to another episode of the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. Stay tuned. New episode tomorrow. Dr. Gerald Horn is going to join us. Please follow and subscribe, leave a review, share the show, follow us on social media. You can see all the links below in the show description. Remember that this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge, because talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter on Connecting the Dots. Let me see 1 second here if my Wednesday guest, I'm trying to work out a Wednesday guest, and trying to see if he has responded, because we're having some scheduling issues. No, he has not responded yet. But with that, we're going to forge ahead. So, folks, this is the time of the day. I got to say that, what am I going to say here? Again, remember, this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge. Talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. See y'all tomorrow. Until then, I am Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a wonderful, wonderful remainder of your day. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.